There's a beautiful meditation. Yeah, thank you. This morning I'm talking about the subconscious mind and fear. This is a very interesting subject and one that we should all be interested in, not just for ourselves, but to help us better understand the behavior of human beings, certain causes of their behaviors. And particularly if you are a counselor, whether you're a psychiatrist or psychologist or just the kind of person that people come to, to get advice from, it's very helpful to understand what the subconscious mind is and what it is made of. So I've always been interested in the mind and the brain, but the subconscious is, for us, for those that study the esoteric teaching, it's, for most of us, I think it's just part of our nature. We understand, the power the subconscious mind and its contents have over us and our family and friends and so forth. But the general population knows nothing of consequence anyway. So I think it's important for those of us that have an opportunity to share our knowledge with others. This is one area that we can safely talk about because it's not abstract. It's very earthly, put it that way. So today I'll be talking about the subconscious mind and fear. Let me start with some words of Master M. He gives us examples. He starts out by giving us examples of a few people who are fearless. And specifically, he is talking about Helena Rourke and Helena Blavatsky. And this is found in Supermundane 1, verse 37. He says, Urasvati, who is Helena Rourke, that's her spiritual name, Urasvati carries fearlessness in her heart. Now just imagine this. Don't just let your brain only listen to this, but take notes, really think about it. Imagine yourself like Urasvati carrying fearlessness in the heart. He says, we affirm that this quality is accumulated, this quality of carrying fearlessness in the heart is accumulated through faith and also through lengthy experience. Upasika, now Upasika is Blavatsky, Helena Blavatsky. He says Upasika was an example of complete fearlessness in life. She was courageous in all circumstances, and no fear would intrude. The life of Upasika was filled with occasions for fear. It was sad to see how many persecutions came together, how her name was slandered. She had no means, and accusers threatened her from all sides. Verily, she was a touchstone of fearlessness. One can cite many examples throughout the ages. Every one of us, with the capital U, meaning the great ones, every one of us has frequently had occasion to show such fearlessness. It goes on in Supermundane to talk more about this. This is so interesting. He says, it should not be thought that we are protected in our earthly lives from all onslaughts of darkness. Those who fulfill an earthly mission. See, now he's letting us know, he's teaching us something here. When he says it should not be thought that we are protected in our earthly lives. Most people think that the great ones, that the masters, are not in physical body, are not walking on the planet. He is saying just the opposite, right? He's saying, again, I'm repeating this, it should not be thought that we are protected in our earthly lives from all onslaughts of darkness. Those who fulfill an earthly mission do so under earthly conditions. People usually think that we dwell in safety and think of us as supernatural beings. Relatively speaking, he says, we can overcome much, but this battle is a real one. We remain victorious because the hierarchy of light cannot be conquered by darkness. So he's giving us encouragement, and this encouragement brings faith to us, helps us align and feel more strongly connected with the members of hierarchy as we go through and experience our own earthly mission. Too often, I think, that we become so earthbound in our thinking that such behavior now goes into the subconscious mind and builds on itself. Disciples, illumined people, aspirants, initiates, as they come into this planet and engage in an earthly mission, we must not allow ourselves to lose contact with these great ones, with hierarchy, and to stop thinking according to the frequency of the earth, behavior of humanity, but to align ourselves and have faith in what hierarchy is telling us. He says we travel on far-off worlds where we gather many lessons in fearlessness. The alien conditions of the planet's unusual atmospheres can affect the heart of the visitor. He says our sister, Urasvati, knows the sensation of these distant flights. She knows the particularly difficult feeling upon the return of the subtle body. There are always complications, and much courage is needed during these experiences. One should consult our records of these distant flights to recognize the degree of daring they require. So one asks, how do we consult their records? By studying the teaching, by reading the history, the biography of Helena Blavatsky and Helena Rourke. Most of you know by now that we're busily engaged with translating a lot of those unpublished writings of the Rourkes. And as you read through her diaries and her notes and her conversation with the master, you learn about the records of these distant flights and the danger and the courage and the fearlessness that was required. And then the verse ends by saying, you can imagine our joy in finding workers worthy of our trust. Their striving spirits do not fear being tested. Only hypocrites fear that the ray of light might penetrate into the depths of their being. Open hearts form a beautiful necklace for the higher worlds. I don't want to repeat that last sentence. It's so amazing. Open hearts form a beautiful necklace for the higher worlds. So now I'm going to talk about the subconscious, because it is through the subconscious that fear is carried forth over many of our incarnations. So the mental plane. The mental plane consists of 7 subplanes. The subconscious mind makes up the 7th and 6th and 5th subplanes of the 7. 7, 6, and 5. We always start with the lower and go to the higher. So 7, 6, and 5, number 5. These are the lower subplanes of the mental plane. This is where the subconscious mind is located. So we understand the subconscious mind as being located in the lower mental planes. Esoterically, these levels are called levels under the threshold. As your sensitivities become refined and you're more receptive to these subplanes of consciousness, subplanes of the mental plane, you begin to recognize and even actually experience the differences of these subplanes. It is very interesting. So but our sensitivities have to increase. It's like, what does that mean? It has to do with frequency, it has to do with tonality, it has to do with color. So frequency, each subplane of these 7 subplanes of the mental plane, each has a frequency. Each frequency has a color. As our consciousness expands, we become increasingly sensitive to these 7 frequencies. As we become increasingly sensitive to these different frequencies and color and energy, we begin to recognize when that subconscious is functioning in our lives and that it's not real. I mean, it's a real experience, but it is the recordings of many, many lifetimes that has now been triggered and is now taking control, over our behavior. Now we have, so the subconscious is the 7th, 6th, and 5th subplanes. Now we have the conscious mind. The conscious mind refers to the 4th subplane of the mental plane, and of course is referred to as the conscious mind. Now, in our non-conscious moments, whatever we feel, whatever we imagine, whatever thought forms we identify ourselves with goes into the subconscious. This is when we are experiencing non-conscious moments. Non-conscious moments can occur when we are frozen with fear, when we are depressed, when we are emotionally distraught. We are experiencing non-conscious moments. It's during these moments that whatever we feel, whatever we imagine, Whatever thought forms we identify ourselves with go into the subconscious and accumulate age after age after age, life after life after life. It's like some of you know the last 2.5 months I've been dealing with some health issues, and I have reached a point where I don't want to talk to any doctor. I don't want to hear anyone's opinion, because every doctor and every opinion are in conflict. And they are insensitive to this person's situation, and they become like a textbook, like they're reading words. You know how you can, it's like I just recently downloaded a piece of software called Speakify, and Speakify will, you put your documents in this software and it will read back, your lectures and so forth. And I thought that would be really cool. And that's how they're talking. It's like this automaton. They have this textbook memory of their anatomy classes, and if this person has that, then they can expect this, and so on and so forth. To the point where I finally realized, my God, this information comes in with such mixed messages, so many mixed messages. It's activating the subconscious. And it's like, okay, I'm done. Don't talk to me anymore. I'll figure this out myself. So this is why the teaching tells us when a friend of yours is ill, or going through an emotional crisis, just be there and love them. Don't give them your opinion and your prejudice. Don't try to save them. Just be there. Be their friend. Be loving in silence. Try to do that, because if you don't, everything you say goes into the subconscious. And everything you say will be based on prejudice and opinion, unless you're an expert. Many of these accumulations are the root cause of our fears. Fears which we must eliminate if we want to experience the heights of the supramundane world. These accumulations occur during certain non-conscious moments, such as when you suffer, when you are worried, when you fall into anxiety. These are all non-conscious moments, and they begin to accumulate. When you are in the grip of fear, anger, or hatred, when you slander and fall into treason, when you are insulted, defeated, have failed, or have been beaten down, becomes a non-conscious moment. When you see, it's like a person may say, how can you be detached when you are being so seriously insulted or berated or betrayed? That's our challenge. See, the way we can train ourselves not to fall into a non-conscious moment is faith in who you are. Faith in who you are. You're not the consciousness of the person who's insulting you. Who insults another person anyway? One who is functioning through the control of the subconscious. It's not for us to judge that person, but it's for us not to fall into a a non-conscious moment. Now, the reason I'm using the word non-conscious is because normally the word spoken would be unconscious moment. But there are two definitions for the word unconscious. One definition is that our mind is not yet illumined to the degree that we can understand or perceive higher spheres of consciousness. So we're unconscious of the activity that's going on. The other definition of unconscious is the subconscious, that we are functioning through the unconscious behaviors, which is the subconscious mind. So by saying non-conscious, it covers everything. What is interesting to me is that not only does our subconscious register things while we are going through our day-to-day lives, but also while we are asleep at night. For example, sometimes we meet with negative conditions on the astral plane, just like what we experience in the physical plane in our waking day-to-day life. During these moments, we collect astral events in our subconscious. Certain frightening dreams or even attacks that come from our enemies or attacks that come to us from the dark forces go directly into the subconscious if we are not awake on the astral plane. In other words, if you are not conscious on the astral plane. Some dark forces project very depleting, destructive images into our subconscious, which eventually, you know what's going to happen, it affects your life. Some people are happy and content to sit in front of the TV set or computer and watch movies about serious and dark levels of crime, violence, ugliness, and horror. And let me step aside of that for a minute. I am definitely not a person who says don't watch TV. I have wonderful channels on my television set that like PBS, that present incredibly beautiful and wonderful movies and documentaries. They're absolutely fantastic. You have the History Channel. You know, if you're a history buff, incredible documentaries there. But you have to be discerning. You know, you need to be discriminating. It's like I've been watching some episodes of John Adams, and I have learned so much about the history of this country that I would not normally, you know, sit down with a book and read it. So I'm definitely not against TV, but what I am against is to sit in front of your TV set and be an automaton, to be a zombie. You know, I just zone out. Because then crime and violence and ugliness and horror will sink into the person's subconscious. I think this is why vampires and zombie movies are still so popular. We can see the opposition against crime, the opposition against crime, violence, horror, and ugliness is dying out and is becoming accepted. When I see some of the titles of movies and the snippets that they show us now on our huge screens, it's like, what the hey is going on? And these are the most popular movies, the top 10. And, oh my gosh, what are we doing to ourselves? Movies of ugliness and crime and horror and violence are attracting the largest audiences. So when we have a movie that features Tom Hanks, we're so happy, because there are just certain Hollywood actors, if they're in a movie, it's safe to watch. Right? Meryl Streep is another one. The facts speak for themselves. Weekly, I receive multiple announcements of the most popular streaming movies online. 90% of these so-called popular movies are horror movies. And if you see in the upper left-hand corner of your screen, it says, warning, sex, nudity, violence, and smoking. Okay, it's an automatic. Let's move to the next one. These things are the evidence that the accumulations of the subconscious mind is controlling people's lives. When the subconscious accumulates a sufficient amount of events, it slowly blocks the person's conscious mind. Blocks the person's conscious mind, that fourth subplane of those 7 subplanes. Or fifth one, I'm sorry. The fourth, I was right. Takes control and rules a person's life. Now listen to this. This is a statistic. Even if 10% of the person's consciousness, 10% of the person's consciousness, their conscious mind is left, the subconscious blocks that too. That 10%. Blocks that 10% and dominates their life. Do you see what is happening to humankind, to our humanity? We must learn about these things and try to change them, starting with ourselves. We must carefully and seriously study the teaching about the nature of the subconscious mind, and then boldly look at ourselves, especially at the root of fear that may be found in our subconscious. Fear is, we're told, is like an octopus in the subconscious mind. It relates almost every element in our subconscious to everything else. This is why the major trigger and push button in our mind is fear. People who know these facts manipulate us and use their formula of fear. Once we are afraid, once the fear penetrates into our subconscious mind begins its mobilization and releases the elements that we know so well: hatred, revenge, jealousy, anger, and associated images and imaginations. So the dark forces use fear to occupy and possess us. Some of our dreams and nightmares are the result of their projections, associated with the fears in the subconscious, and creates horrors and paralysis in our life, in our creative life particularly. A sage, speaking about fear, gives certain formulas which he says can be used very effectively. One of them is a mantra, which needs to and can be repeated daily, many times with concentration, faith, and willpower, which is, let reality govern my every thought, and truth be the master of my life. Let reality govern my every thought, and truth be the master of my life. The second suggestion is this. First, still your body. Quiet the astral body. Still the physical body. Quiet the astral and then link up with your higher self and figure out the proper method or procedure of how to meet with your difficulty. It's like with myself. I finally said, I'm done with this. You know, I've been put on medications that nearly destroyed me. If you don't take that medication, Joleen, you know, blah, 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 blah. Meanwhile, see what I'm saying? Say, okay, they're not helping me. I'm going to have to work this out. So you reason out the proper method or procedure in meeting the difficulty. After having exhausted all the higher rational methods and having clearly seen your course of action, then you raise your vibration as high as possible and call down the intuitional level. Bring that intuitional energy, that frequency, that color into your consciousness and let it put a light on the situation. So this is like a meditation. Relax your physical body, go into the astral. It's almost like you're going to intimidate that damn astral body into quiescence. Be quiet, be quiet, be quiet. Begin to think about what the problem is. Ask for some help. This is your seed thought. Give some silence, then let the light of intuition come in. If your intuition and reasoning faculty is on the mark, then proceed, knowing as an occult fact that nothing can happen but what is for the best. You are being guided, and the one who sees the end from the beginning makes no error. Such an exercise, we are told, brings in the fiery current of light from the intuitional plane and burns away accumulations of fear, not only in the subconscious mind, but also correspondingly in the astral plane. It also burns the sediments of fear that's circulating in your bloodstream. That's a very interesting point. But know this, there are, of course, sources of fear that only your teacher or master can fight against, and they often provide a shield for our protection. Many years ago, I was engaged in a battle with one of, let me call it, a person of occult power. The battle was taking place on the astral plane. The person would visit me night after night in my dreams, trying to instill fears in me, trying to subjugate me, to bring me under his control. I finally went to my teacher about it, and he said he would go to battle for me. He says, not to worry. That evening, I was able to watch that battle take place. In seconds, the connecting link between that dark force and myself was broken with the sword of protection by my dear teacher. I can now engage in these battles myself because I have been tested so many times. And in these tests, we learn. What do we learn? We learn that we are the capital S self. And there is no power in the world that can defeat us. We learn that such tests burn the sediments of fear circulating in our bloodstream. As I mentioned before, these tests and exercises bring in the fiery currents of light from the intuitional plane and burn away accumulations of fear, not only in the subconscious, but also, like I said, the astral plane. My teacher shared a story about when he once visited a monastery where the teachers would train their students in fearlessness. There was a 6-month course through which only some students were able to go, to be accepted. It was a dangerous course, but the basic foundation was that nothing would happen to the student if they were not in their karma. Some students argued about such a belief, but the course was there, and those who had passed through it seemed to show a high level of leadership in their life. I won't go into all the training processes as it was described to me, but I can share two of these tests. One of them is they had to catch snakes with their hands. And another one was they had to enter into a flaming house and bring out certain objects. Try it. Grab that snake. But not just one. In the book Super Mundane, it talks to us about death and the fear of death. In Super Mundane 1, it says, from remote times, people have been accustomed to fear so-called death. They were always intimidated by hell, and at the same time were not told about the meaning of perfectment. One cannot ask people to be brave if they do not know why they are on earth and where they will be directed when liberated. We entrust our co-workers to repeat as much as they can to people about the great eternity and the continuity of life. We have not left. The verse that is referring to the masters, they say, we have not left, but have voluntarily remained on earth. We have consciously accepted earthly life. We could be far away. We could be far away, he says, but we choose to remain with the suffering ones. That's us. The suffering ones. Our vigil would not be unswerving if we were influenced by fear. As physicians, we know what devastation fear produces in the human organism. And I think I'm going to close with this. Earthly physicians should distinguish a special kind of sickness caused by fear. Let them experience our attention, capital O. You are our attention. Let them understand how harmful is fear. Do not think that fieriness comes by itself. It must be cultivated through many lives. So I was going to talk about elementals and so forth related to the subconscious, but I think I've shared enough to help us better understand the subconscious. But in case not, I'll talk about it again next Sunday, okay?